Sports and the Fired Up Sports Show, which are available on all major podcasting hosting sites and social media. Also, check out Mark Ramos' Roundup on firedupsports.com, which breaks down the happenings going on with all your favorite local teams.
The Philadelphia Eagles are Super Bowl champions.
Swinging a miss, struck him out. The Philadelphia Phillies are 2008 World Champions of Baseball.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Flyers are going to win the Stanley Cup. The Flyers win the Stanley Cup for the lead. Yes! Iverson, wow, what a fake off Daniels as he broke his ankles and got all the way to the cup.
Well, good morning. Good morning. It's Drunk on the Ice, episode 206. But there's going to be a lot of Russian conversation. So don't be surprised if the comments coming in are they look like Egyptian symbols, because we might get some Russian comments here. But it's a lot of good, a lot of promising news. I won't say good news, but promising news about the new Russian phenom that may be coming over here sooner than later. Just it's got Flyers social media all buzz. You got the I'll have to see if I can pull up the graphic that I saw someone put together. The Photoshop Matvey Michkov skating around the Wells Fargo holding the Lord Stanley. It's all things I'm here for. So Mark, good morning. Saturday morning. It's the what are we calling this? The morning skate? You can call it the morning skate. Yeah. I like that. Yeah. Talk to me about all things just in general before we get into the details.
Yeah. The Matvey Michkov news is pretty significant for the Flyers. A lot of people think right now that there's the organization and his Russian team, SKA, the SKA program, and Michkov and his agent are working towards trying to get out of this contract, right? I think he's under contract till 2026. If they get him out of this contract early, he can come to the NHL early. He can play for the Flyers early.
Right.
And it's kind of too like where there's not a whole lot, I don't think, that the Flyers can really do about it. Like they have to kind of let them work it out. And, but I think the anticipation is that it's kind of, it's maybe 50-50. I believe I heard Ann Sanfilippo of Crossing Abroad mention it.
Okay.
As like a 50-50 kind of thing. And based on what he has heard, he's usually pretty plugged in.
Right.
But we'll take it. 50-50 is exciting either way, right? Like, so.
I mean, listen, 50-50 is better than, 2 years from now.
Yeah.
So the fact, and I know that there's like the contractual conversations between leagues. There's a I can't remember if it's a written rule or if it's an unwritten rule. There's like almost like an understanding that like the Flyers can't intervene and say like, oh, well, whatever the buyout of the contract is, we'll kind of offset that on our end. It has to be
right.
There's a lot of logistical moving parts, and I also know that, the Flyers kind of have to stay silent on this because they don't want to play their cards too early. And, maybe that causes or offsets the Russian team that he's playing for right now, Scott, to be like, no, they're going to pull him back and kind of keep him for the duration because they know that now there's a bargaining chip. So like right. It's a very delicate situation. I know that it's the kind of thing where it's like the more you read, it depends on the perspective of who you're reading it from. Mm-hmm. Yeah, there are some reports out there that are, skewing it more promising. Some are like basically saying like it's kind of the status quo hasn't changed from a couple months ago. So it's a lot of digging through the weeds. Some of it using Google Translate to kind of figure out what's being reported, but it's interesting. It's an interesting perspective, and it does kind of based on the way that the season played out and the perspective of the fact that they played a lot better than I think anybody thought they played, albeit they had the end of the season the way the season ends the way it does with them not making the playoffs. They lose a pile of games right down the end to kind of make the playoff the opportunity to play in the playoffs a moot point. But I like the idea of kind of forward thinking where this could be, and then fast tracking that. If that means that you have to put, kind of the plan, you're not going to bring him over and then stash him in Lehigh Valley, right?
I don't
over and go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, I don't mean to cut you off, Don, but I'm pretty sure that there'd be some kind of agreement that if he were to come here and not make the big club, that he couldn't even go to Lehigh Valley, that he'd have to come back to
Go back.
the KHL, which I understand from his perspective, and also, it's like, and I'm not saying that this is happening, but I think just like when I read general conversation about this situation and all, it's like there's a really, really promising opportunity for the Flyers to build this pathway with, if you get a good reputation with the KHL and their teams, like working with their teams, you can build this pathway where players are then willing to come over. And I mean, like, I look at what Washington did with Ovechkin, and
Okay.
I mean, that then attracted players like Evgeny Kuznetsov and things like that, where, like, these guys then want to come play with, like, some of their, if like for Russia and for Russian players, I mean, I'm sure playing with like Alexander Ovechkin's like an absolute like dream come true.
Right.
Like, if you get that opportunity, like, to build a pathway with with not just the organization, but the league in general.
Mm-hmm.
I think when you mentioned the buyout of the contract, I think, like, currency wise, I'm pretty sure it comes out to, like, in US dollars, it comes out to like a couple $100,000. Like, it's not even like
I
for a
got you.
franchise, especially like one like the Flyers owned by Comcast Spectacor, like, that's penny.
Right. That's pocket change.
They could come to them and just be like, I mean, like, we'll write you a check for that, but they're not allowed to do that,
Correct.
So, you don't want to come and apply, like, your North American business practices to an organization and a player that they're not from here. They do things differently there, and so there's not like a whole lot the organization like can do at this point, but
Right.
but it does sound like, I mean, for all intents and purposes, it sounds like sometime in the near future, like, Scott's planning to allow Michkov to come, stateside. So
Yeah. And listen, Mark, it different age groups, but the conversation that was being had about Kevin Sullivan seems very similar, right? They know that the future of this particular player is with another organization in a different league that has a higher, I won't say like a higher level of professional, but the talent level jumps from the KHL to the NHL.
Mhm.
So like you're having the same conversation, at least in union circles, with the fact that Kevin Sullivan is here. He's going to play here for the next 4 years. But the understanding is that when he's 18 and he has the ability to go play in the EPL, that's where his future lies.
Yes.
I know that there's a lot of conversation with the growth of soccer in this country and how that might affect, and hopefully, like there are some people kind of, crossing their fingers that the growth of the sport in this country grows in the next 4 years to the point where maybe he reconsiders. But that would mean exponential growth in a very short amount of time to be able to accommodate a salary of which he's going to. But the conversation around Matvei Michkov is very similar. They know,
Yes.
I think they know in the KHL that the future of this particular player is with another organization in the
Yes.
Flyers. I think that the point that you made earlier is really important because the more that teams can build that relationship with the KHL, the more likely teams are to know that that's an option, that they won't shy away from maybe potentially drafting guys or signing guys.
Yes. Yes. I think that's really like, yeah, I think that's like a really large and important part, especially for a team like the Flyers that have had, um, over the years. I mean, they've had kind of like, there was a time, there was a time there where like the Flyers didn't take Russian players at all.
At
Like they
all. Like just they just avoided them completely.
yeah. And it's like, that's like, if you're like, take any sport, right? Like any sport that has like any international flavor to it. It's like baseball and like, being an MLB organization and like cutting out Asia or or like
Right. Yeah.
or Latin America, you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
that's a like
I mean, that's
large
to be able
talent.
to, to cut off an entire country's worth of talent is,
Mhm.
because of the experiences you had in the past. Now, obviously, right, we're now talking about new regime, new
Yes.
leadership, which in the very short amount of time has shown a lot of growth in terms of their ability and their flexibility to be able to, navigate situations, be creative with contracts, be creative with moving players. Which gives me a lot of promise. It gives me a lot of forward thinking in terms of where this team could be.
Mhm.
And I'm gonna pull up the picture, Mark, that I was referencing.
Nope.
I'm here for it
Look
all.
at that.
And listen, if you're listening back, there is an image on the screen, and it looks pretty good. Um, it's the Matvei Michkov 39 orange Flyers orange with Lord Stanley. And let's be honest, Mark, they've been, they obviously, and I'm going to use the word celebrated very in jest here. They celebrated 50 years since the last cup
Yep.
recently. It's about time. This team has long awaited a return to the prominence that it used to have.
Yeah.
And they got close, obviously, a couple years in the, within the last 25 years, they've had, a couple really good swings at it.
Mhm.
Just not able to complete it. I saw that and I was like, it looked really good. And it was like a really good photo edit.
Yeah.
And the photo edit, I got it. So Brian Getz, I'm not sure who he works with, what he does, if he freelances, but solid work, Brian. Really,
Yeah.
really good work. Because
Very cool.
I had to, outside of the blurry guys in the background, it looks pretty damn good.
It does. It does. It's been too, like, I think, like, you mentioned, like, the team celebrating the 50 years since the last cup. And, um, you know, it's fun to see that people are people are thinking that way again, even if the team's not, watching the NHL playoffs and stuff can often, if you're a fan of a team that's in the middle of a rebuild and things like that, when you watch like the Stanley Cup playoffs, because the talent's so great and the games are so quick, you can
Mhm.
feel like you're just, there's like this huge gorge between you and those teams. But things can change very quickly. And it's nice to see fans kind of like have those thoughts again and images again,
Right.
because it's been a long time since I think Flyers fans could even like think about,
Right.
maybe someday, we'll get back to the promised land there. So
Yeah.
that's a cool
Listen,
picture.
it really is. Now, like, listen, along those same lines, fast tracking anything and everything Flyers into elite level prominence.
Yeah.
I found this article on the Brotherly Puck, predicting the fly.
Oh man.
Now listen, this is the absolutely most optimistic perspective I saw on predicting the Flyers roster for next year.
Yeah.
Right, but all right, here we go. The first line: Mitchkov shows up early. You land Trevor Zegras and Mitch Marner. like, like wildly creative, but like it says the Flyers go out of their way to make the two biggest additions in the organization's 15-year future, and they complement the arrival of the brand new offensively dramatic top line. If that's the top line, sign me up.
Right.
And then it says for the second line, Flyers land Goudreau in a swap of bad contracts for bad contracts. He immediately becomes the most dynamic player Morgan Frost has ever lined up with, and a sophomore Tyson Forrester's gore-scoring ability. Noah Cates, Sean Monahan, and Owen Tippett on the third line. Whew.
Yeah.
Talk to me about the perspective of, listen, the perspective of adding, let's just talk any one of those four guys. So you're talking about Mitchkov, Zegras, Mitch Marner, and Johnny Gaudreau.
Mm-hmm.
Talk to me about the potential to add any one of those guys in a signing or a trade.
Yeah, I've given probably more thought than most people about the Flyers looking into this Mitch Marner thing. I have no idea if that's something that they're going to consider or not.
Right.
I don't even know if they have the pieces to make a deal with Toronto on a deal like that. But I think, I think a lot of he doesn't perform in the playoffs. He's soft. He's this, he's that. I feel like a lot of that's kind of like, it's much like, like when you look at like something like goaltending and, you kind of look at it like it's not a problem until it's a problem. It's, you don't need, like, you don't need them until you need them kind of thing.
Right.
And I think with Marner and that spotlight being so large in Toronto and so many of those guys that it's their dream to play for the Leafs. And,
right.
I can only imagine the pressure that they would be under, playing for, the team that were playing in the backyard pretending to play for, and then you get to play for them.
Right.
And like, I think like the Mariner stuff is kind of, he didn't have a good playoff this year, but I think in general, like you're a bad playoff performer until you're not, right? Like,
right.
And I think like with Mitch, I think the talent level is so great. He can play center, he can play wing. Like if the Flyers were somehow able to get him, I mean, he'd be like, or if he were like that possibility became like a realistic possibility for the organization. I mean,
Right.
like I there's not a lot of things I wouldn't want to do to get a player like that.
All right, I'm gonna give you a comp from another sport.
Okay.
Is Mitch Marner Saquon Barkley? Like talented, wildly talented, electric on in games, but maybe not the best performer in playoffs. Maybe hasn't had, listen, Mitch Marner's probably had more playoff opportunities, but like,
yes.
When you talk about like that, to me, their career paths seem very similar.
Yeah, I think, the Leafs.
And now, like maybe Saquon Barkley has the new opportunity with a new team surrounded by significantly more talent maybe Mitch Marner gets a change of scenery. Now, listen, there's no
Yeah.
one on this Flyers roster that's as talented as Austin Matthews, but
Right.
maybe a change, maybe the change of scenery. Who knows?
Yeah, I think Marner would be like, in addition to that, like, I mean, no disrespect to the guys that have been here, but I mean, like, Marner would come here as well, and he'd be the best, like, straightaway hockey talent that they've had,
Correct.
probably since Giroux was here. But I mean, like, even then, I mean, like, Marner, I think there's like a belief that he's better than that, and Saquon like that's an interesting comparable. I think the Leafs and Mariners situation, it really mirrors too. Like, it's very Sixers-esque
Yeah,
thing
it is.
about it.
I think we touched on this a little bit last week.
Yeah, I think you
I can't
threw it out
remember on
there.
which episode, but like,
Yeah,
yeah, they wow,
yeah,
the Sixers Leafs comparable is like, especially in the playoffs.
yeah. Frustration in the playoffs. There's usually a heightened emphasis on their star players, whether or not they're performing to, like, an adequate level. I think, like, for the playoffs this past, like, the first round matchup with the Bruins, I think at least to me, I kind of, like, I watched that was pretty much. I haven't watched a lot of the playoffs. I watched some here and there. I'm watching more now.
Yeah,
Now that we're getting closer to the cup, but I was not as, like, I thought that disparity between the Bruins and the Leafs was, I mean, it was razor thin. Like, that series very well could have gone the other way
oh,
in the
absolutely.
Leafs' favor. And, I think, like, I look at defense and goaltending first and foremost for Toronto and think that that's probably what they need to, there's something, that's something they need to look into this summer. And they may have to move a player like Mariner to get that piece on the back end, or get that high caliber goaltender in here that, can steal them a series. And then you'd still have Matthews, Willie Nylander, Matthew Nyes. Like, they have some other guys that
Yeah,
can play, so, but I think you threw that comparable out there with the Sixers and the Leafs. And I think it's really, really, that's a really apt comparison. I think that's very, very
yeah.
similar to their situations.
It is interesting, and it's it's good. Essentially, it's good off season conversation because
Yeah.
there's a lot of hypothetical stuff to go around, and it's just it's the kind of thing where it's like you're in order to turn this around, you're going to have to be really creative.
Yeah.
You just are. All right, so before we jump out of here, talk to me about you've got you want to start with, like, Western Conference has been exciting to see Edmonton kind of advance to a point where you can really, really appreciate the talent level of a guy like Connor McDavid.
Mm-hmm.
And for him to be in a situation where you get to highlight a player like that who hasn't had the opportunity, to play in this level of the playoffs. Man, very, very, very impressive. He gets the double overtime goal. He's just fun to watch, man. He is just really, really electric. And that's the only reason why I love Edmonton. I love Edmonton to advance because I want to continue to see more. There's not a guy on Dallas that I want to see more than I want to see McDavid.
Yeah. Yeah. He's the best player in the world, Connor's the best player in the world, and he has been for some time now. There's kind of been, like, an emphasis on this series. Like, I have a feeling that whoever comes out of the Western Conference is going to win the Stanley Cup this year. Like, that's kind of how I feel about, like, these two teams. I mean, I look at the East and it's really, really hard to go all the way back and then win it. I think so. Like, for a team like Florida, even though they're very good, I wonder about that. If you start to fade a little bit, the fatigue kind of sets in from 2 back-to-back long seasons like that. So I do think that the Cup winner is going to come out of the West. I believe Game 2 is tonight for them, and in Dallas.
Yeah.
And I look at Game 1, and I watched the entire Game 1, and there's a lot of talk too about like Connor maybe not scoring as many goals, and like I think that was like absolute, and I think Dallas is a really really good deep team, but if the impression is that Connor's not putting the puck in the net as much, for him to get the game winner in double OT, that is terrible news if you're the Stars, because
Yeah.
because already, Connor creates so much, like whether he's scoring or not. I mean, it's like he's like this. He's a very like he's undeniable. He's completely undeniable in terms of like, and any real star has been at their peak, the peak of their powers, right? Like Sid was like that when he was at the top
Mhm.
of his game. Ovechkin was like that when he was at the top of his game. It was like there's like this inevitability that they just create so much offense that
Yeah.
they're going to get theirs. And I thought Dallas really needed to clean up. Dallas really needs to kind of clean up. They were a little lackadaisical with the puck in the neutral zones and things like
Mhm.
that. And you're asking for a lot of trouble with a team like Edmonton with Draisaitl and McDavid if you're gonna be lackadaisical with the puck in those areas of the ice. So
Yeah, it's they have been really, really impressive offensively. Like not just
Mhm.
like winning games, but putting up a ton of points, right? Like you look at the points leaders in this playoff series, in this playoff run, right?
Mhm.
And the top 4 guys are from Edmonton.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like you're talking about, Draisaitl, McDavid, Bouchard, and then Nugent Hopkins, right? You're talking about 25, 23, 21, 17,
Mhm.
right? You don't get to Trocheck it with the Rangers until the 5th leading scorer in the playoffs. So
Yeah.
not only are they winning, but they're also scoring up runs, right? And Zach Hyman is a guy who's put up 12 goals in this playoff. Like he's been
Yeah.
really impressive. They're getting contributions all up and down their roster. Just really, really impressive. And I know McDavid has caught a ton of shit in the last couple of years when he's not performing as well in these playoffs. So it's nice to see him be able to be on a team that's kind of putting it all together all at the right time.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and I'm with you on that. I think the idea that the team that's going to come out of the West is the team that, to me, is most likely to kind of take it, to the Stanley Cup and be able to kind of hoist a trophy. I look at I look at where the East is, right? And you're talking
Mhm.
about the Rangers, that playoff series is it seems pretty evenly matched between Florida and New York.
Mhm.
The Florida takes game 1. New York looked kind of sleepy in game 1. I'm just here for all things New York to fail. So
Yeah. Um, that series has been. I mean, Barkley Goodrow won the game last night in OT, I believe. I think
mhm.
he scored the game winner for the Rangers to even up the series, and that was a big game. That was a really essential game. But we know as well, like with the Rangers. I mean, I they won the President's Trophy, I believe, this year for best regular season team, and it was one of the best New York Rangers seasons in quite a while. Like, and one thing we know about Peter Laviolette teams is like they show a lot of resolve,
Mhm.
and that game got real physical. There was last night, and it kind of felt like at least like for me, it kind of felt like the Panthers were a little bit gooning it up a little bit out there. I mean, there were some
A little bit.
heavy borderline hits thrown in that in that game, and but the Rangers, they got a lot of talent too. Like if we get like if we get like an Oilers Rangers Stanley Cup, I mean, like that could be offensively just like a super fun series.
Yeah,
Um,
I'll tell you what, the combination of those two teams would be a really fun series to watch because I feel
yeah,
like it would be a lot. it would be like an old school, like late 90s heavyweight fight.
Yeah.
Like it would just be haymakers. Like you could see them kind of going goal for goal in a series where you might see games that are 5-4, 6-5. You know,
Mhm.
if that's the series, if it's New York and Edmonton, I'm not a betting man, but I would tell you to bet the over.
Yeah.
Like bet the over on goals, because I feel like that's as good of an opportunity for you to see really offensively impressive games, and it's basically like who's going to let up less goals.
Right. And, you know, the speed would be, in of itself, I think both teams are really great skating teams. And that would be a really, really fun series. Even though I can't really stomach the Rangers going to the cup here. Um, but you mentioned about the Oilers, and you were running through the guys that have played well for them. I think we'd be remiss not to mention, especially in game one, I thought Stuart Skinner played a really great game in goal for the Oilers. I thought he looked really, really good. He made some big stops and some big moments, and um, that's a underrated piece of it as well. Where every year we see guys. Sometimes it's a star goalie, sometimes it's not even really a star goalie. I mean,
Yeah,
some guys just they get in that zone. Goalies are weird, and sometimes they can make a difference in a series. And I really thought Skinner was good. He made some really, really tough saves, like point blank saves too, I think,
yeah,
in big moments for the Oilers. But
yeah.
that's
Listen,
another thing. All
they're
four teams got good goalies in this
yeah,
era.
that's what I was about to say. Like you're getting really good, and that's a sign of teams as the deeper they get into these playoff runs, right? The
Yeah,
more that you can rely on the last line of defense to be able to essentially save the day,
yeah,
because there are going to be times where mistakes are made, um, pucks are lost, and we're not breaking any news here, but like the further along you get in these playoff runs, the more that every move is exponentially magnified.
yeah,
Every pass, every shot, every penalty, every goal, everything is magnified.
yeah,
So the and especially those saves, those backbreaking saves of when a team's up 2-1, and you got a guy who's going corner to corner, and pulls one out of his backside, and essentially keeps the game 2-1
yeah,
instead of letting the game get to 3-1. um those plays, the momentum swings in those games are huge, and we've seen it time after time where like a save gets made like that, and then not a couple minutes later the goal gets scored. Now the game's 2-2, and the
yeah,
whole momentum shift
yeah.
is it's like a landslide all to one end. So
Mhm.
like having that last line of defense is paramount
Yeah.
as you get into these playoff runs.
Yeah. You need guys, you need saves in those big moments. And sometimes that's what it comes down to. I mean,
Yeah,
especially in games like that. I mean, sometimes you just need somebody to go post to post and make this outrageous save.
true.
Um, in games like that. And all four goalies left, I think, really have, obviously in the East, I think, Shesterkin and Bob are they're in a class of their own.
Can we talk
And
about Bob for half a second?
yeah, he's still very, very good.
I can't wrap my head around the fact that we had the choice between those two guys,
Mhm.
and we picked the one who's absolutely bonkers in left field, who's like, and then the guy that we decide to not go to is a guy that has the really long, sustaining, consistent career.
Vesna
Uh,
Trophy
vet,
level. Yeah.
like I'm just, I don't know what we miss. What did the organization miss that made them decide Was it like this guy's more talented? This guy, we don't see it. He's a young, unproven guy, and they just didn't hang on to let him develop enough. I was watching him the other night, and I'm going, man, like if you had just hung on, if you had just hung on to him for half a second and let him develop just a little bit more, maybe you would have gotten some glimpses into the idea that he could have been what he is.
Yeah. That was, that situation was, it's a good.
It was humongous big.
That was a very it's very apropos for the organization right now in a rebuild. That when you hand out bad contracts and things like that, it can compound other issues. They went out and got Briz because they felt like they needed to sign him. They gave him a deal that was outrageous even for the time. And, Bob didn't want to be a backup. The Flyers were already committed. The money and the years were already there. You make the move and because you're thinking you're stuck with this guy come hell or high water, right?
Right.
And, Bob goes on to have a really, really excellent career. And, Briz didn't last much longer. I think the Flyers ended up buying him out another year or two after. So,
and then they were on the carousel after that. They were
right.
it was just guy after guy after guy after guy until, until Carter Hart arrived. And then, we saw how that played out this year. So you feel like you're almost like I'm really hopeful that they're not getting back into that carousel like that. One of these young guys that they have either right now or in their farm system really gives them the opportunity to see a guy that they can just kind of solidify, identify as the number one, and you're going to get year two of both of the guys that you saw this year. So I'm looking for a little bit of consistency and hopefully, the idea that, Fedotov's going to have another year here in-house with your coaching. He's going to have a whole full off season that, Sam Harrison is going to be a guy that can, build up the stamina to be able to sustain being the number one guy for a full season. And maybe that plays out in a way where you get the opportunity to be, looking at the future of your goalies and not, kind of playing this goalie carousel.
Yep. Yeah.
Mark, anything else Flyers related on the way out?
No, not really. I mean, we got some things up our sleeve for the NHL draft coming up. So keep your eye out for that. We'll talk more NHL draft. Water cooler talk will be back soon, so we'll jump into more deep dive more in the draft topics. And I mean, other than what's going on with the team right now, it's really just kind of waiting to see what who wins the cup, and then we'll move into summertime business.
Sounds good. Well, listen, we're gonna play a little intro, outro, but we'll be back on the other end with some Sixers conversation. So stay tuned for episode 207 of Drunk on the Court.
We are part of the Fired Up Sports Network of shows. Please check out other Fired Up Sports Network podcasts like the P-Lot Pod, Water Cooler Talk, Bell Smashers, Philly Sports Love and Pain, Drunk on Broad, Beer Battered Sports, and the Fired Up Sports Show, which are available on all major podcasting hosting sites and social media. Also, check out Mark Ramos' Roundup on firedupsports.com, which breaks down the happenings going on with all your favorite local teams.
The Philadelphia Eagles are Super Bowl champions.
Swing and a miss. Struck him out. The Philadelphia Phillies are 2008 World Champions of Baseball.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Flyers are going to win the Stanley Cup. The Flyers win the Stanley Cup. For the lead. Yes! Iverson, wow, what a fake off Daniels as he broke his ankles and got all the way to the cup.
Oh, well, we're back. Episode 207 of Drunk on the Court. Mark, it's been the off season is kind of not in full swing yet. We're kind of watching the NBA playoffs play out. There's a lot of rumors. There's a lot of big names. Sixers got a lot of salary cap conversation. I'm hoping for a little bit of creativity. There's a lot of guys with a lot of big numbers, a lot of big contracts. I'm looking this is kind of the make or break for Daryl Morey and being able to get his full imprint on building a roster around Joel Embiid, because now the rumor mills start with how long do you build around Joel Embiid? How long do you continue to recycle this conversation? And I think this is one for me. This is one that you ride until the wheels fall off. You ride until Joel Embiid is no longer able to be a part of your organization in a functional way. So I think you keep trying to build around him until it becomes not functional anymore, because we got a little glimpse of this team. Now, obviously, it's last year's iteration of this team, but we got a glimpse of what this group looked like without a guy like Joel Embiid, which is even more important for that roster construction to be able to navigate those times, because he is a guy who's 7'3", who's close to 300 pounds, who does and moves like a guy not his size, but that obviously puts stress and strain on his body. So this offseason, what are you looking at in terms of the roster construction around? Because they don't have a lot of guys under contract.
No. I think for this offseason, this is like, as you said, like, I mean, this is probably Morey's. This is it for like him. Like, this is his opportunity. You're not going to get a better situation in terms of like building this team in the way that you envision it, and have the like financial wherewithal to do so. And so I think this offseason, the one thing I do like so far is that like we've seen the Sixers names attached to so many players and rumors. A Yahoo Sports story from Jake Fisher just recently dropped a couple of days ago, and where it was basically about the Sixers. They're once again in that position where they're trying to like supplant Tyrese Maxey and Joel Embiid with a third star, and how they're going to be able to do that. And I mean, any player who's had any athletic wing, any secondary scoring guard, I mean, like the Sixers seem seemingly attached to, which I would have to imagine.
You're right.
I would have to imagine is, that has to be a very meticulous effort by the Sixers, I think, and Daryl Morey, to kind of like float the idea that the Sixers are very, very much open for business.
I think that's the promising thing for me, right? It seems like the amount of names that are attached to the Sixers, whether it be free agents or guys that would be attached to them in trades, does give me a lot of hope that there is the prospect that they're going to be creative in terms of how they're going to be able to construct this roster, whether it's, guys like Pascal Siakam, whether it's guys, but you're combating other, like, there are other factors that are in place, right? Is a guy, do they have to do a sign and trade to be able to get a guy like that? You got, established leadership veterans like LeBron James, who, and then there's the whole Bronny conversation, right? And I got to pause real quick with the Bronny conversation. I saw the most ridiculous segment on Sports Center the other day, and I don't normally tune into Sports Center, but it just kind of came on when I turned the TV on. And it was about the potential for Bronny to be the number one pick, and the sports betting about the money that's being put down on him potentially being the number one pick, when I'm also listening to guys that are well-to-do in the know in terms of draft evaluation, and they're saying that he's the 100th rated prospect. Like, that in most years, you take the name off, and he's not even a guy who's in a conversation to be drafted.
Yeah.
And I don't know, man. So I digress. Back to actual viable conversation.
Yeah.
It is cool. What's been the most intriguing thing that you've heard?
I think I've said on this show before about we're hearing, like, the Sixers seem to be really hot for Paul George, for PG, right? And I'm still, I don't know if I think, like, the more I hear about other things and, like, things that are happening throughout the league, and there's rumors everywhere, right? But I think like a Jimmy Butler return would be more viable than, like, them going and getting Paul George, like, just by the mere fact that, like, his situation is, like, I don't know why he would leave LA to come east, knowing that, I just don't know that, like, the money and everything else is as enticing enough to get him here. There may even be, like, a Lakers piece to that, where, like, maybe, like, the Lakers are able to work something out with the Clippers where they can kind of make a swap and PG heads to the Lakers and he can still stay in LA. I don't know if that's like a thing or not, but it sounds like, a Pat Riley and the Heat and Jimmy Butler, that seems like that's at its wit's end.
Right.
At the same time,
it does feel like that's kind of run its course. I worry about Jimmy's inability to be able to stay healthy.
Right.
He is on the back end of 35.
Mm-hmm.
So, the Paul George inconsistency when the moments are, when the lights are the brightest, there's none of these guys are perfect.
No.
But you need someone else there.
I wonder, Don, like, I think what I'm thinking about, and I wonder if that's, like, something that, like, factors into the Sixers' plans at all, is that, like, not only are you looking for somebody who's going to, like, help you kind of get over the top, but, like, I mean, I've seen things about, like, Klay, Klay Thompson and things like that. And it's,
Klay Thompson 5-6 years ago.
Right. Oh,
absolutely.
Yeah, that'd be different, right?
Right. Like, I remember right before Klay signed his huge deal with, Golden State, that was like, if there was a more ideal guy to put with Joel Embiid, it was a sharpshooter who was an athletic wing that you could just kind of leave alone, and the space that it would create on the inside, which, like, but Klay Thompson now?
Yeah. Yeah. It's like when you said, like, none of these players are perfect, it's so true because, like, when NBA players, there's like years and years of evidence to suggest that, right? Like, guys get to a certain age that mid 30ish, like, that's just what you deal with guys at that age in the NBA, the mileage on their bodies, the years of just, like, it takes its toll on guys, especially like guys that have had deep playoff runs and things like that have played like a lot of basketball. It takes its toll on people and their bodies. And I wonder if like age factors in for the Sixers at all. Like we mentioned on the last show, like a guy like Brandon Ingram. Like I believe Brandon Ingram's in his late 20s. Like is like that seems like when you consider all things, like he not only may be a good basketball fit for you, but he also might be able to like be like the middle-aged piece to like Joel and Tyrese. And because like I mean, like I would imagine, because you don't want to leave too. Like if it ends up like not working out and you try to reload this thing and it just becomes a disaster, like you don't want to leave yourself in a position where Maxi's approaching those prime years and there's like nothing left here, and like the only like viable situation to move forward in the future is to like move on from these older injury prone players and also move Maxi, because you just got to start over at that point. You know what I mean?
Like I'm so that's why to me, the more that I look at guys like Jimmy Butler and Paul George, where the allure is there because of what they've done already in the league. It also gives me pause, because now I'm going, okay, well, we're talking with those two guys that are in their late 30s, and you're essentially paying them for what they've already done, not what they can do.
Right.
And, so that's why to me, I'm trying to, like, when I'm looking at options, I'm looking at guys that are a little bit younger, right? That's why I'm kind of skewing more towards guys like Brandon Ingram, guys like I would be really excited if they were able to figure out a way to add OG Anunoby. Like that's a guy in that Knicks series to me that was really impressive. I'm looking at,
For sure.
Who's the kid out in Utah? And I think we talked about him before.
Lauri Markkanen.
Like Lauri Markkanen. I'm looking at those guys that may not have the name of Jimmy Butler and Paul George, but guys that would fit really well in terms of getting younger, getting more athletic, putting Joel Embiid in a more advantageous situation when he's on the court to be able to be more productive because you can spread the floor. I think the athleticism that I saw from Anunoby was really, really exciting to see. Albeit I was seeing it in a place where I hated him because he's obviously playing the Knicks against the Sixers. But I think that like that's where I'm kind of skewing more towards that end. The only established veteran guy that I have any remote interest in is LeBron James. And only for the simple fact that I feel like this team needs an established vet that has been in the wars, that has been to finals, that has won finals MVPs, because you saw in this last Knicks series at the end of games that the veteran leadership was just not there. Like there was no guy holding down the fort to say like, let's call a timeout. Let's pause. Let's whatever it was, right? You saw time after time in that Knicks series that at the end of games, that's where they really struggled the most, because they didn't have that veteran leadership that I think is a thing that you can get from LeBron James. And if you can combine LeBron James with a guy like Anunoby or, Markkanen or Brandon Ingram, some combination of that, and then a bunch of other vet guys, I think you get LeBron James, and then you get the guys that want to come and play with him too.
Right, exactly. You mentioned like OG Anunoby and things like that. I mean, like OG's been like, he would be a great fit. I think, being able to add him, right? We talk about like athletic wings. We've been talking about athletic wings on this show for, you know what I mean? Like trying to like improve this wing depth for this, this team. So it almost feels like, with Tobias moving on here and then some of the other options that exist, it's like, God, please correct this. Like, in some,
Seriously.
use a large chunk of that money to correct this. The
I think
LeBron.
that contract, real quick, that contract, I think we will look back on that contract and realize how much of an albatross that really was
Oh
in
man.
terms of the way that it prevented them from doing other things too.
Yeah, it hindered them in lots of ways. And then, like, you're able to stomach it a little bit more if he's like not having nights. He's not having those 2 for 7 nights
Right.
and things like that. There were too many of that. There was too much of that there in the life of the contract. And then, I mean, that was a really, really not a good piece of business at all. But we're on the other side of that now. And but we haven't mentioned the name that I actually saw out there that I thought, low key, an interesting name. I wanted to throw at you, Don, that
Sure.
I think is out there, and I had been reading about, and I thought, yeah, maybe that'd be a really good fit here. Not as like the third guy, but someone who's like, you can add that maybe his best basketball is ahead of him, and that's Sacramento's Malik Monk.
I like it.
Yeah,
I like it a lot. I like it a lot from like a floor general perspective.
Mhm.
Like he's a guy who is very comfortable with the ball in his hands, very athletic. Reminds me the athleticism reminds me a lot of what you see from Tyrese Maxey in terms of his ability to be able to get to the hole, draw contact. And I like the fact that it would allow Tyrese Maxey to play off ball, which I think is where he is best. In terms of his ability to be able to like get the ball on the wing and drive and be able to create that contact. I would be interested. And I think that that's a guy that you can get that's not going to hamstring you with a giant number either. Like he's going to get money, but he's not going to get like Pascal Siakam money. He's not going to get like that. That's a guy. I love that. I love that. And that's, that's a move that I think is a very gettable move.
Yeah. He averaged 15 last year for the Kings. And, every time I've watched him, I've like seen him in playoff series and things like that, or a late national broadcast that I'm catching. Anytime I've like gotten to sit down and watch Malik Monk, I'm usually like, I'm like, this dude can play a little bit. Like, and, he's one of those, I think he's 26 years old. So like, there's a chance that, I look at like the current play, not to veer too much off the topic, but
you're good.
Watching like the playoffs and things like that, and you see like some of the teams that are left here and that are competing, like look at a team like Dallas where like so much of their production comes from Kyrie and Luka. But
True.
I mean, look at like the year, like or not even really the year, but the playoff that like PJ Washington has had.
You need guys like that. He has had a really, really impressive playoff run.
Yeah. And I don't know if it's like, I'm not sure if it's a hot streak or like this is like going to be the new norm for PJ, but you need guys like that can get hot for sustainable stretches where like when it comes to the matching up, like even like the top players in the game, they can't be, they're just gonna have nights where they're just like, they're going to get theirs because they're great. But like, there's going to be nights, there's going to be a lot of shooting performances where like, it's just, the number looks ugly, but you're getting to the line, you're aggressive, you're getting your points in other ways, right? Like that's really what's happened with Ant Edwards, with the Timberwolves. Look at the pure shooting numbers have been not that great, but so I Malik Monk and then a high quality wing, I think I'd give Morey like an A+ summer, and then you backfill the roster with, some of those veteran types.
Absolutely. I'm gonna throw a couple other names at you guys. The first name I want to throw at you is DeMar DeRozan. In in that same kind of vein, I think he can be a guy that can create a lot of space, that can create opportunities for other guys on the court, but can also score. I just don't know if he's not the only reason I kind of skew away is that he doesn't seem to me like a guy that if Embiid is not on the court, he's not a guy that can just take over a game,
Right.
which you're going to need. Now, if that means, I think that the history that he has with Nick Nurse, I think is, to see the way that Nick Nurse was able to utilize him in Toronto,
Mhm.
gives me, I like the outside shooting. I like the opportunities that he would get. I just, I don't know. He's a guy that I'm kind of on the fence on. What are your thoughts on him?
Yeah, the last I read about Damar was that like his preference even at this point is to return to Chicago. I don't know if that's going to happen or not. And yeah, Damar's interesting, but I'm not sure. As you said, like having somebody who's like, without the stars on the floor, how much are you really going to get from him? The
He
Sixers
seems to me
need,
like he's a guy that's like would be a third option on a good team.
yeah, and like and a team that's deep too, like
Right.
where
Yeah.
if he's not having that night, someone can get you, you know, um, someone else can get you those points and those buckets.
Right.
And it's like, yeah, I'm not too sure about Demar, and I think I've gone back and forth. I've kind of yo-yoed with the idea of them going after Demar. I think he
I
kind of
agree.
feels like a secondary guy if like the PG, like some of the bigger names kind of start coming off the list. He might be somebody that they then pivot to, but I don't know that he's going to be like maybe in plans. Like,
I think he's like a B level, C level option. I think there would
right,
have to be a lot of other chips that would come off the board first
sure,
that wouldn't go the Sixers' way, where they would have to pivot to that.
yeah,
The other guy is, if that same scenario plays out, and there's a lot of guys that are signing but not with the Sixers, exploring the trade options with a guy like Donovan Mitchell.
mm,
He's a guy who, the things that we talked about with Malik Monk in terms of his ability to be able to, handle the ball, run the offense, allow Maxey to kind of play off ball, the space and the athleticism that he would command on the court could create space for the other guys, and including giving space to Joel Embiid. Talk to me about Donovan Mitchell.
man. Especially coming off this playoff run here with Cleveland. Remember like coming out of Utah, it was kind of like I think for Donovan, it was kind of like people were really down on him. Like I remember people really being down on him having like this recent really really tough playoff where he was a man possessed. I mean, that game 7, that performance he put on against Orlando, and he did that a couple times, and he can fill it up, man. He can really fill it up.
Yeah, you
He's
certainly
another,
don't have to worry about like if you need a guy to just take a million shots and score a ton of points, like he's
yeah,
your guy.
yeah. And I wonder, like, that makes me wonder about the fit as well, though. As you said, for that
True.
exact reason, you know, what does it do to Maxi and Bede's games if Donovan Mitchell's taking 30 shots,
Yeah, seriously.
in a game, and I am of the belief though now, and I'll say this now because I've been really really not great to him on this show. Is if Kyrie Irving can kind of like remake himself as like, hey man, this is Luka's team. I'm here to like if he could do that, then I think Donovan Mitchell could do that. So
Yeah, listen, he's figured out to play a really good Robin role. and
Yeah.
realize that like when he was playing with LeBron and he was Robin, he fits that role much better than he fits the Batman role that he tried to play when he was in Boston and Brooklyn. And,
Right.
like when he realized that he doesn't have to be the guy and
Hmm.
he doesn't have to do it all by himself. Um, Man, he looks every bit of, the guy that you need at the top of your roster to be able to go on a, on a deep championship run like they're doing right now.
Yeah, and I do think like for some of these players that are available, that's going to be essential if you decide to. Well, if you get traded here, I guess there's nothing you can do about it. But it's
Right.
like if you sign here, um, it comes with like the belief system and the caveat that like, hey, this is Tyrese and Joel's team, and I'm here to augment them.
Right.
And like guys really relishing that role. Um, we've seen guys do it, right? Like we just talked about Kyrie. Ray Allen did it, in
Yeah.
his
Oh,
career
absolutely.
later in his career. So, guys can do it. It's like guys can do it.
Oh,
It's
most,
just
oh,
like
most definitely.
so. But yeah, I wonder about Donovan Mitchell too. I think there might be there's some other teams out there, some other good teams that have more pressing need at guard that would probably pony up and pay what a team like Cleveland's probably looking for.
Oh, I don't doubt that. Mark, any other Sixers related stuff? And what's the thing you're most looking forward to in the summer for for the Sixers?
I wonder. I've been reading up quite a bit on this draft coming up here. And I want, there's already rumors out there the Sixers are more than willing to it seems like a foregone conclusion that if they're going to make a trade to kind of help reconfigure the roster, that the first round
Mhm.
pick this year is going to be a part of that. The only thing is that I think a lot of pundits believe that like this draft is really, really not good at all. Not good at all.
No. Um, that this is a draft that you would not minding trading those assets because
Yeah.
unless
And
the only thing that I would say is like if you're going to stash somebody internationally.
right. Right. And I wonder like what like cuz it's like a sliding scale in terms of value. I think like it's one thing to be like, hey, like, we're more than willing to throw the pick in. Like this isn't, that's one thing, but if everybody is of the unanimous belief that like, yeah, this draft is awful, like it doesn't even sound like Atlanta was all that happy with getting the first overall pick. And it's like what
Which
are we going to do with this? Like,
yeah, like you want to take a guy, but there's obviously not a guy like the guy that was available at number one last year,
yeah.
and like so
Yeah.
you end up just you take the best guy, but it's like how bad does the draft have to be? You're like, oh, we'll just take the best guy available. Like
Yeah.
there's not even like a clear
Yeah. And
guy to take at the top of the pick.
so I wonder like how not even just for the Sixers, but how so many other teams are going to navigate that draft because
Yeah.
we've been wrong. We've been wrong before of draft
Mhm.
evaluations. This draft may yield a star or two. I don't know if most people know who those stars will be, but like, or where they'll get taken. But
Yeah.
it's tough because I think like using the draft as trade capital. I mean, like when you're in the situation like the Sixers are, using the
Mhm.
draft capital, it's just kind of like it's a part of doing business, right? It's the cost of doing business, and maybe in a normal year you wouldn't be as worried about, or you would be a little bit more hesitant rather to move that pick, but it's hard to trade picks that nobody really wants to begin with.
Yeah, seriously. Like I'm looking at a mock draft right now, and there's not a whole lot of guys, and part of that is the way that guys are moving with the NIL deals in
Mhm.
college, where they're not staying at college as long enough for people to get familiar with them. Um, like the only guy I'm looking at, like, the top two guys in this mock draft are guys from France, guys that are 6'9" and 7'1", but then like Donovan Clingan is the kid, the 7'3" kid from UConn is a guy that I recognize only from the latest prominence of UConn.
Yep.
But there's guys on here I don't recognize
Reed
a whole lot
Shepherd.
of guys. Yeah, like it's just I don't know if that says more about the state of college basketball or the lack of talent, but it should be an interesting offseason. I'm curious to see. Obviously the Sixers are going to be pretty busy. So listen, on the way out, go Sixers.
Yeah, well, we'll say go Sixers. I mean, maybe in the next time we do this show, some other rumor comes out. Maybe it's not go Sixers, but
Well, listen, we'll be here to talk all things Sixers, off-season stuff, draft stuff. We'll this team is not in a position where they're counting on draft picks to kind of push them over the needle.
Yeah.
So, but we'll see how this offseason plays out, and we'll be here to talk about it. So, have a great Memorial Day weekend. Enjoy your time off, your beverages, your cocktails, your family, and we'll see you on the next one.
Peace.
Later.